Hello and welcome to another episode of And Yet We Believe. I am Ann Pimentel and this is my husband Roger.
How you doing?
We're a married couple having honest conversations about the beautiful messy middle of Latter-day Saint life. And we are excited to talk tonight about spirituality.
So we titled this one, Spirituality, I Do Not Think It Means What You Think It Means.
That was not how he says it in the movie.
I don't know, it seemed disrespectful to do the accent. I don't know. We're just gonna leave it right there. Okay, to set this up, we're all trying to be closer to God. Mm-hmm. I assume we are. I assume if you're listening to the podcast, you fall into that bucket. And maybe some days you feel like you're really doing it. Mm-hmm. And you're feeling the Spirit and all of that. And maybe other days you're not.
Yeah.
And that's how it is for me. And so you start to ask, what does it mean to feel the Spirit? What does it feel like? How do I know if I'm feeling the Spirit? How do I feel it more often? And then if your brain operates like mine, it kind of moves into like, well, I've been baptized and I've been given the gift of the Holy Ghost. Mm-hmm. And so I am entitled to the constant companionship of the Holy Ghost. Do I have that? Do I not? Because I don't feel it all the time. What if it's been a long time since I felt prompted to do something? Is that a bad thing? So I think in the church, we've been taught some specifics about what it means to feel the Spirit. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in real practical life, those things don't hold up.
And so are you equating feeling the Spirit with having spiritual experiences and being a spiritual person?
I think that's a great question. I think we should dig into that.
Okay.
And so kind of what I'm framing up at the beginning here is this is the way we talk about it in church.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about feeling the Spirit. We talk about promptings of the Spirit. We talk about the gift of the Holy Ghost. And if you're not feeling it all the time, I think that turns into a shame spiral of, am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? What do I need to do more of? And I don't think that living in tension and shame and trying to manufacture spiritual experiences is the right way to go about that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I definitely agree that I've been taught a certain way to understand spirituality, and I think it is primarily those moments where you're all warm and fuzzy, or you're crying because the Spirit is there, or something like that, and I don't have those all day, every day.
Right.
And so
it would be weird if you did.
Yeah, it would be weird. And so it has felt in the past that I'm missing something, that I'm not doing something right.
Yeah. Because
I'm not feeling the Spirit all the time. And actually, if I think back in my life when I was the most spiritual or having the most spiritual experiences, clearly that's going to be the mission for me. Yeah. Where you literally cannot do anything else but read your scriptures and pray and teach people the gospel. No one can do that all the time. Right. And so why would we hold that up as a standard of if I'm going to be spiritual and have these spiritual experiences all the time, then I need to be reading my scriptures 24/7 and praying. Mm-hmm. And that's not. We have kids.
We got things to do.
We have things to do. We can't do that.
Well, and that accelerates into scrupulosity and perfectionism, toxic perfectionism, so quickly. And so I love kind of normalizing the idea of, hey, things go up and down. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're feeling really spiritual and great, and other times not so much. Maybe you're in a dry spell, whatever it may be. I pulled this quote from Nadia Bolz-Weber. She wrote this in her Substack months ago, and this phrase has stuck in my head ever since. Okay. She says, "This is my sort of spirituality, very lumpy and inconsistent. Filled with praise of God, but with little sprinkles of doubt and wanting my enemies destroyed on top."
Oh my.
That was in context of some other stuff, but this idea of spirituality being lumpy and inconsistent, I thought was really great, and kind of a visual on that.
Yeah. So I have a few things of what, if we're going to step out and broaden our definition of what spirituality is, sometimes it's helpful to say what it's not.
Okay.
Also.
All right, let's hear it.
So a few things. Spirituality is not constant emotional highs. That's what we were just talking about. It is not certainty, clarity, or having the, quote, right answers.
Okay. Yep.
That gets a little tricky, and we can come back to that.
Yep.
It is not moral superiority or being more, quote, evolved than other people.
Okay.
And it is not a guarantee of peace, happiness, or a protection from pain.
Love that.
Yeah. I think when we think about spirituality, we're thinking of this nirvana goal, right? And
some sort of inner peace.
Yeah, where you're not having pain, you're not having, you know everything, you've got it all figured out, you have all the answers. That is not a definition of spirituality that serves me. That doesn't help me do anything.
It's not particularly useful if it's not attainable.
Right. So one thing that I think is important to know is spirituality is not about escaping life, but it's actually stepping more fully into life.
Ooh, yeah.
I really like that thought of, it's being more authentic and full and seeing what is around you and seeing God in what is around you.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit, because the way we talk about feeling the Spirit, it even has the word feeling in it. And I think that's problematic. That seems really brittle to me, to have communion with God be a feeling, because I have lots of other feelings that aren't that. And so, and I actually thought of Ebenezer Scrooge on this one.
Oh.
Because he says that thing when I almost said the Marleys appear. That's in the Muppets version. There's just one Marley in the book. But when Jacob Marley appears to him, he says, "You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you." And so, are you having a burning in the bosom, or is it heartburn? There are lots of other things that go on in our bodies and lots of ways that we feel feelings. And I don't know that a feeling, you talk about emotional highs, I don't know that that's the best way to measure our communion with God.
Yeah, and if it's hard enough to figure out what our feelings are, and so many of us grew up suppressing feelings and, not really wanting to deal with certain feelings. And if that's how we're saying that God is entering our lives, then that is just muddy, confusing, and hard to deal with.
So what should we do?
Well, I actually really love this quote from Jim Finley that I found, and he says, "The greatest teacher of God's presence is..." I'm going to start over. "The greatest teacher of God's presence in our life is our life." So, to me, that means we can find God in everything around us.
Yes.
And not just these certain few feelings, but God is everywhere. And God is, if we can allow it, God can permeate everything in our lives.
So this is something that I'm learning in real time.
Okay.
This is something that I'm learning right now in my life, in my faith journey. And I think this communion with God comes in two parts. One is an underlying covenantal fact, which is Emmanuel, it is God with us.
Right.
That doesn't change. That we can always rely on. And there is a practiced attention on our part. That's the other half of this, which is our turning toward God. But I think that God is there in the rocks and in the trees. And I think God is there in other people. And I think God is in the buildings and in the cracks in the street and everything that we see and hear and smell. And we experience God in and through all of those things.
Yeah.
Now, I did not get taught this in primary.
No. But it's interesting because there is that one song. Whenever I hear the song of a bird, whatever,
It was there all along.
Right? And I loved that song. That was the
Great
one
song,
I always asked my mom to sing me when I was trying to go to sleep as a child. It was there, and somehow we were told, yes, God is in those things, but you better pray, and you better read your scriptures, and you better show up to church and go to the temple, and, there were all these other things to do.
Right.
To actually get us to God.
all of these transactions to have.
Exactly.
Because that's what it always comes back to, is I'm going to ask for something and God is going to give me something. Right. And it's these kind of discrete packages that go back and forth.
Yeah.
And when we start to see God in the world around us, when we see God in creation and we see God in other people, that's not a transaction. That's a relationship.
Right. I love that so much. I heard this really beautiful poem from our friend and favorite podcaster, Susan Hinckley. And let me just read it. It's short. She wrote, it's called Babel. She says, God speaks to us in any language we can understand. God in birds, God in trees, in wind, tall grass, its whisper and its bend. God in pie, if it's the kind my grandma made. God in the dishwater slipping through her hands. After we are filled, God in the suds and in the song she hummed. Listen. I love that.
That's amazing.
Isn't that beautiful?
Wow.
God is everywhere. And we just have to listen. God will speak to us in our individual language if we're just willing to listen.
Yeah. So there's a scripture in 1 Thessalonians 5 where Paul talks about we should pray without ceasing. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple ways you could read this phrase. And one is to say we should pray often. But the other way that you can read it is that we should pray without ceasing.
Okay. And does this mean being on your knees and praying all the time?
Good question. Let's talk about that. So Origen of Alexandria, the great North African grandfather of Christianity, said that the only way we could pray without ceasing was when we realized that our life is one big prayer.
Okay.
One big continual prayer. And this line, all life is conversation with the divine, actually comes from Micah Petro, who is constantly quoting Origen, so that should make sense there. And so someone else from the Center for Action and Contemplation, where Mike Petro and others are, this is Carmen Azevedo Butcher. So she did some translations of Brother Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And that's not brother in like the way we talk about it in with each other at church.
Right, in LDS vocab.
Right, but this was a monk, hundreds of years ago. And he was kind of a funny monk. He described himself as a bumbling oaf and talked about how he failed at a bunch of things in life. He tried to become a hermit and failed at being a hermit, which I don't really know how that works.
I would fail so hard at being a hermit. I like people.
But he went and he joined the monastery and was a monk and for 10 years was in a dark night of the soul and didn't feel like he was getting answers. He was praying, he was doing all these things. Carmen Azevedo Butcher says he was anxious, he was stressed, he was suffering. Then over time he calls this the easiest prayer ever. He says, all of a sudden something happened. I started praying what he calls the presence. And he says all it is whenever he would do a job in the monastery, during the job, after the job, throughout his day, as often as he could, he would return to love. That's it. And so just like you described with the dishwasher, and he was working in the kitchen, so he probably had the dishwater as well. But returning to love, returning to God in whatever menial chore you're doing, while you're driving, whatever that is. And that was how Brother Lawrence approached, I'm going to make my life one big continual prayer.
Yeah. That's interesting. As you were saying that, it jogged a little memory of mine just from last week. Not a very far memory, right. But as we were preparing for our episode last week about dehumanization and how the words we use matter, I was thinking about people that are unhoused on the street and how, you hear people say, like, if you just walk past and ignore these people, then you're not being Christ-like. And I was like, I can't stop at every person. We have things to do. And like, that's something that kind of eats at me whenever I see unhoused people on the corner or just, wherever. I always feel like I need to do something and I'm not doing enough. And I thought last week, what I need to do is just send them love. And that is small, but that returning to love that Brother Lawrence was saying, that just kind of clicked in my mind of, like, that is a prayer, to send love out to people, to, lead with love. And I don't know if it helps. I don't know.
Right.
But I'm noticing the person. I'm recognizing, I'm acknowledging that they're there, and I'm doing what I can, at least in that moment. And other times I can do more, maybe. But
right.
I think that's really beautiful. And that what a beautiful way to invite the Spirit into a moment that seems every day.
Right.
You're not really paying attention, but you invite that Spirit in and send it on to the person that you're seeing.
And I think with the person on the street, even in a car driving by, if we're taking the moment to see God in that person, I think that changes us.
Yeah.
Maybe there's nothing I can do in the moment for that person, but that can change me by seeing God in the least of these.
Yeah. I really like that. You had talked a little earlier about, I don't even remember the words exactly that you said, but not being a transaction.
Yes.
And what I think is, well, there's a quote from Sue Monk Kidd from her book, When the Heart Waits. And she says, let me find this quote. She says, "I wonder sometimes if we haven't banished the way of the heart in favor of the way of the mind, if we emphasize learning about God over being with God."
Yes.
And I think that, to that point of not being transactional, learning about God is learning the concepts and the doctrines and explanations and having the answers, but being with God is presence and awareness and its relationship.
Yep.
And there is a different type of spirituality that happens when you are in relationship with God, when you see God everywhere. That is, like I was saying earlier, that's that more full and authentic, deeper part of spirituality.
Right. We talked about this in a previous episode, talking about church meetings, where we're talking about, in that church meeting, is the emphasis learning about God, or is it experiencing God?
Right.
And I think sometimes our meetings make it quite difficult to experience God at church. I don't know that sitting there with our kids doing stuff, trying to listen to somebody talk, is the best scenario for that. But
but then if you see God in your kids, if you open up to that spirituality, and the baby that's screaming as they bonk their head and they're being carried out, like, instead of having it take you away from feeling the Spirit and having a spiritual moment, but that just feeds into it.
I love this so much. Yeah. I love where this is going. To see the divinity, the sacrament in that moment of this little baby crying and being held by their mom or dad as they're being carried out and that sort of thing. It's strangely beautiful.
It is. Yeah.
And I don't usually think about it that way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we go back to the Jim Finley quote that I shared, the greatest teacher of God's presence in our life is our life.
Yeah.
Those things are all part of our lives. Our kids, on their phone in sacrament meeting or drawing silly pictures or, whatever it is, that is our life. And if we're not going to see God in that, then we're not learning. We're not having that moment that, we're not letting it be a teacher for us of what God is, what the love is.
Yeah, I think we're really quick to divide things into divine or human. And I'm not sure that's a useful division all of the time. It's really common for us to ask, oh, I had this idea. It felt like a spiritual prompting, right? And how do I know if that was the Spirit or if that was my own idea or just some feeling I was having, more gravy than of grave, whatever, about this feeling. And I think that question itself is inadequate to the situation.
Yeah.
Because it's black and white thinking. It divides this line. It says, well, either something is from God or it's from you. Like, you can check the return address on the envelope and see who it came from or whatever. I'm not sure that distinction is always holding up. Because then to be divine, it has to be non-you.
Right.
It separates the two things.
Right. But do we believe that we have divinity in us or not? And God created us as we are, with all the lumpiness, like Nadia
right?
says, right? And so we can see God in all of that, even inside of us.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm hearing more and more people talk about, well, the point isn't, is it the Spirit or was it my own idea? The point is, does it lead you to do good? And I like that a lot. Or you could ask, is this aligned with God and God's character? Does this lead me toward love? I think ultimately it comes down to co-creation, not competition. It's not about, was this me or God?
Who gets the credit?
Who gets a point on the scoreboard for that one? I think we could say to ourselves, even if this was partly me, it can still be holy because God works through us.
Yeah, I really like that. That's just such a different concept than what we've been taught. You know, it feels so far removed and so like, but at the same time it's freeing, and it's just such a bigger way to be, where I can see God everywhere, and I don't have to, as beautiful as the temple is, I don't have to go to the temple to feel God's Spirit. Right? I don't have to do these specific little things, but it's picking kids up at the carpool. It's, it's doing all of the things anyway. That is my life. It's not like setting time aside, which that is great. There is purpose, there's meaning in that, but it doesn't have to be just that.
And you mentioned going to the temple. I feel like I want to expand on that and say it also doesn't mean you can only feel the Spirit when you're reading the scriptures or listening to a conference talk or whatever. If you want to listen to conference talks, I think that's great.
Yeah.
And that probably pushes a little more toward learning about things, consuming content, that sort of thing, because it's possible that it's even easier to experience God when it's quiet.
Well, and I mean, we can definitely have conference talks, for example, as you're saying, be a learning experience.
Yes. And
if we let it stay there at just a learning experience, but we don't embody what we're learning, then we're only doing, it's an incomplete process. We're not doing we're not getting the full experience of God if we're just doing it with our mind and not with our body, with our heart.
Yep. Yeah, as we kind of bridge the human divine gap, then all of these things start to become divine. All of these practices, all of these daily chores, changing a diaper, whatever it may be, these things become divine. Father Richard Rohr, when he talks about this, the words he uses are sacred and profane. And I feel like that exaggerates the difference because it makes the human side sound so vulgar. And, and in our LDS terms, we call this the natural man. We do the exact same thing. The natural man's an enemy to God. We start to think that, okay, if it's a human thing, then it's non-divine by definition, right? I don't think that's the case.
I don't think that explanation of it's just the natural man, I don't think that jives with what we know about the plan of salvation. Right? Because God created all of us, and if we believe that what happened in the garden was part of the plan, that sin had to enter the world as part of the plan. I'm not saying that God made sin necessarily, but God was aware of it, and they were prepared, they had a plan for that. And so that to me is that lumpiness that I was talking about earlier, that the natural woman in me is lumpy and has problems, and but it's all God created, and if I can understand what it is that's going on inside of me and turn it to face God, that's the goal, right? That's what we're trying to do here on earth.
The Family Proclamation, love it or hate it, says that each of us has a divine nature and destiny. And it's kind of funny that it phrases that, because it makes it sound like right now the in-between is not divine. We have a divine nature, we have divine destiny, but I think both of those things make us divine right now. And more I believe that God is in me and that God is in everyone that I see.
Yeah. And I mean, what a waste of life, if we don't have that presence right now, if we think it's only something we were and that we're trying to get back to, but we don't see the beauty of God, of being one of God's creations and, experiencing God in this life. What a waste.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is really interesting about spirituality, and I heard this in an episode of At Last She Said It that I was listening to this morning. They had on a woman that is like a spiritual coach person.
Okay.
Her name was Brittany, I believe. And she was talking about how she kind of made up this word. She's had to depatriarchalize. I don't remember the word she made up.
I get where you're going.
She had to depatriarchy her life, her spirituality, because she realized that everything she had been taught about spirituality, how to experience God and how to have these spiritual experiences, was taught by a man through scripture, through church leaders. Sure. It's all been done by men, and it is a different type of being than most women often are. And so it's not the way that we feel the spirit, or maybe they're telling us to go to the temple and go, do these things, aren't necessarily the ways that women would go about doing it and would teach spirituality.
Fascinating. Okay.
And so I thought that was really interesting to think about. It just kind of stuck with me of like, oh man, I want to examine what is in my life, in my understanding of spirituality, that is heavy in patriarchy. And how could I shift that to be more communal and more nurturing, and things that are more, would lean to the feminine energy. I don't know. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't even have answers, but like, think about that with me. Let's go down this path together, and maybe we'll come back around to that at some point. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. We have a lot of pieces of the gospel that feel like a business. And which has been like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, has been the domain of men, since the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. Like, this is not, I don't think I'm plowing into new ground there.
No, because they left women out and pushed women out. Like, right. That's why it's been the domain of men.
Right, yeah. right. And so we come back to this thing of like, does everything with God have to be a transaction? Can you only hear from God when he wants you to do something, or you've asked for something? And like, yeah, it's like you're sending letters back and forth and this sort of thing. That's very different than the idea of presence, of being held, of some of these nurturing kind of concepts that are in the gospel somewhere if you're looking for them, but they're not right on the surface usually.
Yeah. So to me, that means then if we are giving up the transactional parts of relationship with God and turning it into a more relational thing, to me, that means that part of this broader understanding of spirituality means letting go of control.
Oh, okay.
Right? We can't control, I do this, you give me that.
Yes.
We can't control this spirituality that we have been taught if we're thinking of it in this broader sense. Right. And so it means letting go of needing certainty, letting go of managing outcomes, letting go of controlling how God should show up to you.
We love I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say.
Right.
But it doesn't mean we get to tell God what to do.
Right. And yeah, I feel like I'm just saying this over and over, but when we notice God in everything, it just widens our opportunities to experience God. And yeah, there's less control, but I think there's more transformation. And that's a beautiful thing.
That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, trade in the transactions for transformation. That's the goal, right? Like, eternal growth is the goal. Eternal progression is the goal. That's transformation.
Yeah. Do you want me to keep going? So I've got a couple more things here.
Yeah, I have a couple more thoughts, but why don't you keep going?
Okay. I think just maybe to wrap up this thought of control, control-based spirituality asks, how do I get God to show up for me? Relational spirituality asks, can I stay present to what is?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so it's not having God show up and like, what can I do to get God to be in this moment so I can feel the Spirit, or whatever. But it's just, can I be present and see God in everything that I am doing?
I love that.
Yeah.
And that really changes the lumpiness conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's not, where did God go? Why isn't God here helping me? But it changes it into like our pursuit of God, our seeking God in the world around us. It's that pursuit itself is holy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have this quote from Mirabai Starr from her book, Ordinary Mysticism.
Okay.
And she talks about a mystic being basically anybody that is present in their lives and is having, having experiences and recognizing that relationship, that relational connection with a higher power. She doesn't always necessarily go to God in the way that we understand God. But her quote, she says in that book, "The sacred is always brimming from the heart of everything. If what it means to be a mystic is to walk through this world looking through the eyes of love, then anything and everything that we do with the intention and attention on the sacred, including our most difficult experiences, counts and belongs." So if we have the sacred in us and we're recognizing God in us in everything, then even the hard things and the she says the difficult experiences, those all count and belong in being part of who God is and how God shows up.
I love that because we tend to treat trials, and I'm using that word intentionally, as transactional again.
Right.
And we say, okay, what was I supposed to learn from this situation? What do I get out of this?
Yeah.
Sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But if the reality is that divinity is present in the things that are hard and in the things that feel good, then it's a totally different way to approach it. I don't need to burden it with like teaching me a specific lesson. Yeah. I don't need to get a present at the end.
Yeah, and I think that we also teach that if we don't get a present at the end, if we don't learn something, then we made Christ suffer for nothing.
Oh, yeah, we do that one, yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, how much shame does that give us? Of like, you got to find a reason for everything. That's hard. That's a shame-inducing lesson to have. But if we're already brimming with the sacred, it just flows so much more naturally.
When I was in the bishopric in our ward in Seattle, when I was called into the bishopric, people would say like, oh, your family is going to be blessed. And then like a year into it, I was like, this is a ton of work. Where are the blessings?
Yeah, because we had a baby like months after you went into that bishopric, and it was horribly hard.
Yeah, I'd sit on the stand and watch poor Anne down in the pews with a couple little kids,
and it was a hard time.
And I got bent out of shape about it. It bothered me because I was like, I'm supposed to be blessed for this. What do I have to show for this? Isn't that such a transactional thing? Yeah. What do I have to show for this? And this was not that many years ago, but I was not prepared to see the sacred in everything and in everybody.
Yeah.
Which I think in a role like that, you talk to so many people and you're interacting with the whole ward and all of these things. And there's so much beauty in each child of God when you can see God in them.
Yeah. Man, as we're talking, I just keep thinking how much softer my heart feels when thinking about this. Yeah. Like even that experience of us when you're in that bishopric and it was so hard and it's easy to be angry and bent out of shape, like you're saying. I'll just speak for myself. If I had been able to see God in what I was dealing with, we had a newborn and like a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old or 7-year-old, something like that. They're little kids. But if I had been able to just be present and not be worrying about the next thing and the next thing that has to happen, I feel like my heart would have been so much softer and so much more able to be pliable to transform into who God wants me to be.
Right.
Right. And that, like, I feel now that I missed out in that opportunity.
Yes, I feel the same way.
Yeah. And so that's the homework going forward, I guess, to just have that soft heart and to have this broader understanding of spirituality so that I don't get stuck in this rut of transaction, but I can just be in relationship with God and with the people around me who also embody God. Wow.
I love that.
I love it.
Such a good topic. Should we go for another hour?
Well, I do have just one maybe a little bit of homework for everybody.
Okay, put a bow on it for us.
So just a thought to have as you're going out this week. Ask yourself, where in your life might God already be present without you needing to fix, explain, or improve it?
Oh, yes.
That's the homework. See God in everything around you.
In everything and everybody.
Without needing to fix it.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Love it.
Okay. Thanks for joining us tonight. If you are interested in finding out more about us, you can follow me at The Vision Beautiful on Instagram.
And I'm at From the Overflow. That's from the overflow, and
same with mine.
It's
dots
got dots in it. So.
And you can find us on And Yet We Believe on Instagram. Thanks for listening tonight.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.